Admiral Roque stood at the command console of her flagship, the warship's deep hum vibrating beneath her feet as she observed the blinking holographic map of the sector. The human colony was located on a small planet with minimal resources and even less strategic value to her fleet, yet something had caught her attention. Reports from her scouts in the area mentioned something about strange phenomena occurring on the world, unexplained resistance during small skirmishes, whispers from other fleets about an unidentifiable strength within humanity. Herself dismissed them as nothing more than exaggerated rumors designed to inspire hope among their weak population. The human race was still primitive. No amount of talk would change the fact that they were beneath her. They had always been beneath her. She had seen it in the scans. The humans lacked the technological prowess to challenge a species like hers. They were unworthy of any real attention. But Roque couldn't ignore the nagging thought, what if, just what if, these rumors held even a shred of truth? If there was even a chance that humanity was a more dangerous opponent than anticipated, it would be a mistake to underestimate them. No matter how small their colony was, her fleet would make quick work of it. The humans would fall in line or be wiped from existence, just as every other species had been the moment they posed a threat to her people. So she ordered her commanders to prepare for a swift assault on the planet. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and entered the atmosphere over the dusty, barren terrain of the human colony. The first wave descended with the precision of a surgical strike, leaving no room for error. Every alien soldier was highly trained, equipped with armor that could withstand direct hits from most conventional weapons. Roque could almost taste the victory already. With the surprise attack, she would destroy whatever feeble forces tried to resist. She ordered the deployment of her elite soldiers in the forefront. They would eliminate any semblance of order before the human population could organize a defense. The fleet's bombardment began as the human outposts crumbled under the sheer force of the assault. Their primitive defenses couldn't even make a dent in her fleet's advanced weaponry. Yet the Admiral remained focused, her eyes never leaving the holographic display in front of her. She wanted to make sure everything went according to plan. But as the human colony's surface rippled with explosions, something unexpected happened. Instead of scattering in fear or surrendering, the humans fought back with a defiance that was almost laughable. At first glance, they used makeshift weapons, crude things, nothing compared to her fleet's power, and yet the humans fought with a raw intensity that made Roque pause. The primitive technology they used seemed so out of place against her fleet's weaponry, and yet it worked in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The first human soldiers she encountered were wearing little more than salvaged armor pieced together from what they could find, their weapons crude and jagged. But when they attacked her forces, there was something more than desperation in their eyes. They'd fought like cornered animals, not out of fear, but out of an instinct to protect their land, their homes. And even in the face of certain defeat, they kept coming back, charging forward again and again. Roque had underestimated them, and she knew it now. She could see the flickers of something deeper, something that would not be easily crushed, not by a fleet, not by a single show of force. And for the first time in her long career, she felt a strange sensation, a flicker of something new, the faintest hint of doubt about the humans. It was a thought she quickly pushed aside as weakness, but she could feel the beginnings of an unsettling realization deep within her heart. These humans weren't as helpless as she had assumed, not at all. Roque's initial dismissal of the humans' resistance quickly gave way to an uneasy realization. As the battle raged on, the more her forces engaged the humans, the more unpredictable their tactics became. At first, she had assumed the human soldiers were just untrained and ill-prepared. But as the hours wore on, she saw something more dangerous emerging from their ranks. These humans were learning on the fly, adapting with an ease that left Roque questioning everything she thought she knew about them. They fought as if they were born for it, as if every scrap of their existence had been crafted for this very moment of conflict. When her soldiers pushed forward to secure a command post, a small group of humans emerged from behind a series of battered structures and launched an attack with nothing more than scrap metal and homemade explosives. The force of the blast tore through several of Roque's most elite units, sending them into disarray. It was crude, it was wild, but it was effective. Roque's commanders scrambled to regain control of the situation, but the human defenders were relentless. They seemed to have an unshakable will to fight. And no matter how many they lost, they never gave up. They moved through the terrain with a coordinated precision that seemed far beyond what their technology should allow. They had no shields, no advanced sensors, yet they still outmaneuvered her troops in the dark alleys and dense urban ruins of their colony. The alien soldiers couldn't help but feel as though they were being hunted by an unseen force. These humans knew their land. They knew every corner of their home. Every building and street was used as a weapon against her forces with terrifying efficiency. Roque stood at the observation deck of her flagship, watching the chaos unfold below her. She watched as her elite soldiers fell one by one, unable to predict the next move of their human counterparts. The humans had managed to take out one of her armored columns by trapping it in a narrow street, then using the very debris from their ruined homes to bring it down. It was a simple tactic, but executed with such skill that it took Roque by surprise. It was clear now that these humans weren't relying on strength alone. They were using something far more dangerous: their creativity and adaptability. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting with a purpose, to protect something far greater than themselves. And as Roque watched them push forward, she realized that this wasn't just a battle for survival for the humans. This was a fight for their very identity, and that made them far more dangerous than any opponent she had ever faced before. The human leader who had taken charge of the defense was everywhere, at once, constantly moving through the chaos, rallying his people with words and actions alike. Roque's intelligence reports had indicated that the humans had no true military structure, and yet this leader had managed to pull the colony together into something that resembled an army. It wasn't just the strength of the humans' weapons or the technology they employed. It was the strength of their resolve that caught her attention. The leader was unshaken despite the overwhelming odds against him, and Roque saw that this human was the heart of the resistance. Every decision he made was calculated, but driven by an underlying current of passion that seemed to inspire everyone around him. For the first time in her life, Roque found herself facing an enemy who didn't break under pressure. In fact, they seemed to grow stronger the more she pushed them. The battle wasn't going as planned, and the longer it dragged on, the more Roque had to reconsider her assumptions about the humans. She had thought them weak, primitive, and easy to dominate, but now she was starting to wonder if she had been wrong, if they were capable of much more than she had ever imagined. Perhaps humanity wasn't as insignificant as she had once believed. As the battle raged on, Roque could no longer deny the truth that was unfolding before her eyes. The humans weren't just fighting. They were adapting, evolving in real time. Their every move a calculated response to the shifting tides of war. The alien fleet had expected a quick and decisive victory, but the more they pushed forward, the more they encountered unexpected resistance. It was almost as if the humans were not only defending their homes, but were reading the very intentions of her forces, responding before Roque's soldiers could even react. Her commanders began to voice their concerns. "Admiral, they're outpacing us on the ground," one of them reported with growing frustration. "Their tactics are too fluid. We can't predict them. We've lost 2 more command posts to their counterattacks." Roque clenched her fists, staring at the reports flashing before her. The colony was supposed to be a demonstration of her superior strength, a show to intimidate any other species that might dare defy her empire. Now it was turning into a humiliating struggle, one that was rapidly slipping out of her control. The humans were using their environment to their advantage in ways her soldiers couldn't begin to comprehend. They fought with the raw tenacity of cornered animals, but it was more than that. It was as if they were willing to sacrifice everything to defend what they loved. The human leader, the one who had taken charge of this chaotic defense, was proving to be a crucial element in their resilience. Roque had expected him to falter under pressure, but instead, he thrived in it. She'd seen him rally his people after every loss, every hardship, and with each speech, he seemed to unite them even more tightly. He wasn't merely directing them in battle. He was inspiring them to transcend their own limitations, to push past what seemed impossible. It was unlike anything Roque had encountered before. In all her years of conquest, she had never faced an enemy who could rise to every challenge, no matter how hopeless it appeared. As Roque's forces pushed deeper into the heart of the colony, they encountered resistance unlike anything they had seen so far. The humans had rigged the streets with traps, simple but effective devices that turned the most innocuous objects into weapons. A seemingly abandoned building might explode in a blinding flash of light, knocking down her soldiers and sending them scrambling for cover. Hidden snipers picked off her officers from impossible angles, while civilians, who Roque had assumed would flee at the first sign of danger, fought alongside their soldiers with a fierce determination. Every move the humans made felt like a direct challenge to her command, and the longer the conflict dragged on, the more Roque realized that these people were far from helpless. They didn't need advanced technology or overwhelming numbers to fight back. They were making do with what they had, and they were doing it with terrifying effectiveness. Even in the face of her superior firepower, they refused to back down. Roque found herself pacing in her war room, her hands clasped behind her back as her mind raced. The humans were not only surviving, they were thriving. They were showing her something she had never expected from a species she had once deemed beneath her. She thought of all the civilizations she had conquered, of all the worlds she had shattered without a second thought. She had always relied on the certainty of overwhelming force, but the humans weren't crumbling in the face of it. They were fighting back with something far more dangerous. It wasn't just about their tactics anymore. It was their resolve. There was something indomitable in their will to survive, to protect their way of life, and it was starting to unsettle Roque in ways she couldn't explain. She had expected to wipe them out in hours, maybe days, but it had been weeks now, and the humans were still standing. Worse, they were learning from every mistake, evolving their tactics with each encounter. Roque could feel the pressure mounting on her shoulders. Her fleet had sustained casualties, and the momentum she had once enjoyed was slipping away. The humans were starting to turn the tide, and in the back of her mind, something began to gnaw at her, a question she had never allowed herself to ask. Was it possible that these humans weren't as weak as she had assumed? Was it possible that she had underestimated them completely? The answer, she feared, might change everything. Roque stood at the edge of her command deck, her fingers tight around the rail as she stared down at the battlefield below. The human resistance had grown even more relentless. It wasn't just their tactics anymore, it was their spirit, their sheer will to fight and survive. Her fleet, once so sure of its dominance, was now struggling to maintain its ground. Each report from her commanders seemed to bring more bad news. A new trap had been set. Another ambush had claimed her soldiers, and now entire sections of the colony were being reclaimed by the humans. Every building they destroyed or occupied seemed to return as something else, a battleground, a fortress, a weapon. Her officers, who had once approached her with absolute confidence, were starting to show signs of hesitation. "Admiral," one of them said quietly, eyes flicking nervously to the screen showing another human counterattack. "We've underestimated them. The longer we fight, the more they learn. They're turning every mistake into an advantage." Roque felt a wave of frustration surge through her. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to fold, to break beneath the weight of her might. But instead, they were growing stronger. The humans had already claimed several of her fleet's transport ships, adapting them into makeshift command posts. Worse, they were now using advanced alien technology they had managed to salvage, stripping down her own fallen war machines and reassembling them into new weapons. The human leader, whose name she still didn't know, had proven to be an exceptional strategist. From what her intelligence had gathered, he wasn't a general or a military officer. He was simply a person, one of their own, who had risen to the occasion when the colony needed him most. Roque couldn't help but admire the way he commanded his people. He wasn't just giving orders. He was inspiring them, convincing them that no matter how many losses they suffered, they could still win. It was almost as if he wasn't just leading them to survive the invasion. He was leading them to something greater, something that transcended the immediate battle. She had thought their tenacity was born of desperation, but now she saw it was something else entirely. Their will was unbreakable. The humans did not simply fight for survival. They fought for something deeper, something worth dying for, and that made them far more dangerous than anything she had prepared for. As the days turned into weeks, the toll on Roke's fleet was becoming unbearable. The morale of her soldiers was beginning to fray, and even her most experienced commanders were starting to question whether the invasion could succeed. For the first time in her military career, Roke was confronted with a situation she couldn't simply overpower with her superior firepower. Her forces had superior technology, yes, but the humans had something that no advanced weaponry could destroy: an unyielding sense of purpose. Roke decided to take matters into her own hands. She ordered a concentrated strike against the human stronghold, the heart of their resistance. It was a bold move, but if she could crush their leadership, perhaps the rest of the colony would falter. If she could take the human leader, she would break their spirit. She watched as her fleet positioned itself for the final assault, the massive bombardment ships preparing to obliterate the core of the colony's defenses. But just as the command to fire was issued, a series of explosions rocked the alien ships. Roke watched in disbelief as several of her vessels were knocked off course by the sudden attack. An ambush. The humans had infiltrated their defenses once again. Somehow, they had breached her outer lines and launched a counteroffensive. Roke's jaw clenched as the full realization hit her. The humans weren't simply reacting to her attack. They were anticipating it. Her forces were retreating from the front lines faster than she could control. The humans had cut through her ranks with an intensity and precision she had never seen before. No longer were they just defending. They were pushing back. With a mixture of awe and frustration, Roke realized that the true strength of humanity wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in something far more intangible. She had spent so long relying on sheer power to win her battles, but here, before her, was a force that defied everything she knew. The humans had become the ultimate challenge, and for the first time in her life, Roke was unsure of the outcome. Roke paced the command deck of her flagship, a knot of frustration tightening in her chest. The situation had escalated far beyond what she had anticipated. Her fleet, once the epitome of dominance, was being turned back on its heels by a force she could neither comprehend nor predict. The humans had stolen another of her supply ships, this time one of her largest transports, and they had turned it into a weapon. She watched as the modified ship, piloted by the humans, engaged her own vessels in a game of cat and mouse. Every attack they made was calculated, precise, and devastating. It was becoming clear to Roke that her previous strategy of overwhelming force was no longer working. "Admiral," one of her lieutenants interrupted her thoughts, his voice heavy with unease. "They've completely reconfigured the stolen ship. It's armed with alien weaponry now, and they've synchronized it with their ground assault. We can't get a lock on it." Roke's gaze sharpened, but she said nothing. She could feel the walls of her certainty begin to crumble. The humans weren't just scavenging. They were learning. It was as if they were speaking a language she hadn't even realized they understood, a language of tactics, of adaptation, and of relentless perseverance. On the battlefield below, the humans were everywhere. They had begun using more advanced forms of alien technology, salvaging weapon systems from destroyed ships and repurposing them for their own use. Their snipers, once ineffective against her armored troops, now had access to cloaking technology that made them almost impossible to target. Improvised explosives, once crude, were now more efficient, carefully aimed to disrupt her forces at key moments. The humans were no longer reacting to the fight. They were driving it, and their tactics were unpredictable. Roke clenched her fists. How could they be learning this fast? The humans had no military infrastructure, no formal training. They should have been nothing more than a nuisance, easily swept aside. Yet, against all logic, they were gaining the upper hand. She had underestimated them completely. And now, with her fleet in disarray, it felt like every single decision she made only pushed her closer to defeat. It was at that moment that a transmission from one of her officers arrived, bringing more unwelcome news. "Admiral," the voice crackled over the comm. "The human commander has made contact. He requests a meeting." Roke blinked, momentarily stunned. A meeting? With her? The audacity of the humans was beyond belief. They were on the verge of losing, and yet, here they were, demanding a meeting with her. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as another ploy, but there was a strange feeling in the pit of her stomach that told her this might be something more. "Put him through," she ordered, her voice cold. A few moments later, the face of the human commander appeared on the screen. He was younger than Roque had expected, his expression determined but not arrogant. He didn't look like a traditional leader. He wasn't adorned in armor or boasting with the usual bravado of someone in his position. Instead, he looked almost human. The words he spoke next, though, were anything but typical. "Admiral Roque," the commander said, his voice firm but not without a touch of respect. "You've fought hard. You've shown us what you're capable of. But I think it's time we talk about how this ends." Roque stared at the human, her mind racing. The sheer confidence he exhibited in his calm demeanor was unnerving. Here he was, face to face with an alien admiral, the leader of an advanced empire, and he wasn't afraid. He wasn't begging for mercy. He was offering a conversation as though the outcome was already in his hands. "You think you've won." Roque's voice was a low growl, her patience thinning. "We haven't won yet," the commander replied. "But we are winning. Not because of our technology or our weapons, but because we understand what's at stake. We understand each other. You came here to destroy us. But all you've done is awaken something that we don't give up easily, something you can't break." Roque narrowed her eyes, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. "And what is that?" The commander's gaze hardened. "Hope. We fight for more than just survival. We fight for our families, our homes, and our future. And we will keep fighting until we have it back. If you truly understand strength, Admiral, you'll see that it's not about weapons. It's about what we're willing to die for." Roque felt an unfamiliar sensation twist in her gut. She had fought countless enemies over the years, but none had spoken to her like this human. The human commander was offering no terms of surrender, no plea for mercy, only a quiet promise that they would never stop. They would never bend. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, and for the first time, Roque had to face the truth. This wasn't just a fight for territory. It wasn't just a campaign to wipe out a weak species. It was a fight for something deeper, something she couldn't yet comprehend. As the transmission ended, Roque stood in silence, the echo of the human's words ringing in her ears. Could it be that she had underestimated them all along? Was it possible that humanity was not the insignificant speck in the galaxy she had believed them to be? For the first time, Roque wasn't sure. Roque stood in the silence of her command deck, staring at the empty screen where the human commander's face had once been. His words echoed in her mind, reverberating through the hollow spaces that were once filled with her confidence. For the first time in her long career, she felt uncertainty creeping into her thoughts. It wasn't fear. No, she had faced enemies far more dangerous than these humans, and had always emerged victorious. But something about this conflict was different, something she couldn't easily define. The humans' resolve, their fierce determination to protect their homes, to fight for their families, had struck a chord deep within her. She had seen civilizations crumble beneath her fleet's power, seen species reduced to nothing but dust and memories. She had always believed that victory came from superior strength. That power was the ultimate weapon. But now, facing these humans, she wasn't so sure anymore. They had no advanced weaponry, no fleets of warships or powerful armies, yet they fought with a strength that defied the logic she had always relied on. "Admiral, we're receiving new reports." A voice broke through her reverie. She turned to find her tactical officer standing at attention, a look of concern on his face. "The humans have launched another offensive. It's more coordinated than anything we've seen before. They've taken control of one of our outer supply depots, and they're fortifying it." Roque clenched her fists. The humans were relentless, their drive seemingly endless. She had expected this attack, but not the level of precision they had achieved. It was as though they were not only fighting with everything they had, They were actively learning from each engagement, refining their strategies with each passing hour. No matter how many battles they lost, no matter how many soldiers they sacrificed, they never faltered. And with each victory, however small, their confidence grew. It was as if the more they fought, the more invincible they became. "Send in reinforcements," Roque commanded, her voice tight with resolve. "We will crush them at this depot. We will remind them who they are up against." But even as she gave the order, doubt began to creep in. Was it enough to simply overpower them with sheer numbers? Or was there something more that the humans had, something intangible that she hadn't yet accounted for? It wasn't just about their tactics anymore. It was their will, their conviction. And Roque couldn't shake the feeling that their defiance was only getting stronger the more she fought them. As her forces prepared for the next assault, Roque found herself walking through the halls of her ship, lost in thought. She had faced countless adversaries, each one crumbling before the might of her fleet. But the humans? They were different. They didn't surrender. They didn't bow to pressure. They were fighting with a fire that came from something far deeper than just survival. It was something Roque had never truly understood before. The strength of a people who believed in their right to exist, who were willing to give everything to preserve what was theirs. She entered the war room and glanced at the tactical display. The human forces were reinforcing the supply depot with barricades, using the terrain to their advantage. Their movements were precise, as if they were reading her plans before she even made them. She could almost feel their eyes on her, as if they were anticipating her every move. They knew her tactics. They understood her strengths and weaknesses. And worst of all, they were prepared to use her own strategies against her. "Admiral," one of her officers said, drawing her attention. "We've intercepted another transmission from the human commander. He's requesting a ceasefire." Roque looked at her officer, disbelief crossing her face. A ceasefire? After everything, what could the humans possibly think they had to negotiate with now put him through? She said curtly. The human commander appeared again on the screen. This time, there was no bravado in his expression, no smugness. There was only a quiet, almost somber determination. "Admiral Roque," he began, his voice steady, "I think we both know this can't continue. You've seen what we're capable of. You've seen how we fight. We're not going to stop. We're not going to surrender. And we're not going to give up. If you want to save more lives, if you want to avoid a long and bloody war that will drag on for years, I'm offering you a chance to end this on our terms." Roque stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. Was this another ploy? A trick to lower her guard, to pull her forces into another trap? Or was this human truly offering peace? She had always assumed that her empire's will could crush any resistance, but the humans had shown her a different reality. "You think you can negotiate with me?" Roque's voice was low, laced with disbelief. "You think you can win this war through words?" "I don't think we can win through words," the commander replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. "But I do think we can end it, if you're willing to listen." Roque was silent for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing on her. Could she really afford to continue this fight? Could she continue to lead her fleet to destroy a species that had proven so resilient, so capable? Her mind raced, torn between the pride of conquest and the undeniable truth that these humans were something she had never encountered before. For the first time in years, Roque wasn't sure what the right choice was. Roque stood still, the silence in the war room stretching between her and the human commander. His face, resolute and unyielding, stared back at her from the screen. There was no arrogance in his expression, no desperation, only the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. He was offering peace, or at least a ceasefire, but the question gnawed at her. Why? Why would a species so seemingly primitive and disorganized seek terms with her? Why had they chosen to fight when defeat seemed inevitable? "You think you can trust me?" Roque finally spoke, her voice steady, but edged with suspicion. "You've been fighting us for weeks. What makes you believe I will simply lay down my weapons and listen to your terms?" The human commander met her gaze without flinching. "I don't trust you," he said. "But I do believe you're not here to destroy us entirely. You came to conquer, yes. But you've seen that we can't be broken. You've seen our resolve, our willingness to fight. I think that's something you understand." Roke's mind raced. The human commander was right about one thing. She understood strength. She understood it because, in her empire, it was the only language anyone spoke. She had fought countless species who had crumbled when faced with her fleet's overwhelming power. But these humans, they were different. They did not crumble. They did not run. The more Roke's forces pushed them back, the harder they fought. Every loss seemed to fuel their determination, and every victory, no matter how small, only made them more dangerous. "Strength isn't the only thing that matters in war," the commander continued, his voice calm. "It's about what you stand for, what you're fighting for. You have no idea what it's like to fight for something that's yours, something that you will give your life to protect. We have that, Admiral, and you can't take it from us." The words cut deeper than Roke had expected. She was no stranger to battles fought for more than just land or power. She had seen it before in other species, though never to this degree. The humans weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to preserve their way of life. And in doing so, they had become something she had never anticipated. A true challenge. "Perhaps it is not the strength that matters," Roke murmured, more to herself than to the human. "Perhaps you are right. But I cannot simply turn away. My mission was clear: conquer this world, subdue its people, and bring it under our rule. If I give up now, what does that say about me? About my empire?" The commander nodded, as though he understood. "I'm not asking you to turn away, Admiral. I'm asking you to consider another way. We don't want war. We want peace, but that means respecting our right to exist, our right to choose our future. You've made your point. We're not going to bend to your will, but we can find common ground. If you can be reasonable, we can end this conflict without more bloodshed." Roke stared at the human commander, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. There was something in his words that resonated deep within her, a truth that was hard to ignore. She had always believed in the power of conquest, in the superiority of her fleet and her people. Yet, for the first time, she found herself questioning everything she had fought for. Was this war truly about domination? Or was it about respect? Was it about victory at any cost, or about understanding the true nature of strength? The longer she stared at the commander's face, the more she realized that she wasn't facing a simple rebellion. She was facing a people who would not break, no matter what. And that made them more dangerous than any fleet, any weapon, any army she had ever faced. "You're not asking for surrender, are you?" Roke asked, her voice low. The human commander shook his head. "No, Admiral. We're asking for respect. We're asking for the chance to live without fear." Roke stood silent for a long moment. She had always believed that power was the ultimate truth in the universe, that the strongest force would always triumph. But as she looked at the human commander, she realized that power was not simply about destruction. It was about resilience. And these humans had a resilience she had never encountered before. "Very well," Roke said finally, her voice firm, but quieter than before. "I will consider your terms. But know this, if you truly want peace, you will have to show me that your strength is more than just defiance." The commander's eyes softened slightly. "We'll show you, not with weapons, but with our will." The transmission ended, and Roke stood there, staring at the dark screen, her mind churning with questions she had never allowed herself to ask before. Had she misjudged humanity entirely? Or had she simply been too blinded by her own sense of superiority to see them for what they truly were? For the first time, Roke didn't know the answer. But she knew one thing for certain. This fight was far from over. Roke sat in her private quarters, staring out at the vast emptiness of space through the reinforced windows. The stars glimmered coldly, distant and indifferent, while the weight of the decision she was facing pressed down on her like an unseen force. Her fingers drummed lightly against the surface of the desk, the sound the only thing that seemed to pierce the silence. She had never been one to hesitate. In her military career there was always a clear path, the mission, the goal, and the steps to achieve it. Conquest had always been straightforward. You identified the enemy, you crushed them, and you moved on to the next world. But now, the lines had blurred. She had seen what the humans were capable of, how they had adapted, how they had fought not just for survival, but for something greater. They had made her question everything she had taken for granted. The image of the human commander lingered in her mind. His face had been calm, unyielding, and yet devoid of the arrogance she had expected from an enemy. He wasn't a conqueror. He was a protector. He wasn't trying to dominate her forces. He was trying to preserve his people, to ensure their future. He wasn't offering surrender, but a chance to coexist. And it was that word, coexist, that unsettled her most. Roque had never considered it. It was an alien concept to her. Her empire was built on dominance, on expansion. If you were weak, you perished. If you were strong, you thrived. That had been the only truth she knew. But these humans, they didn't fit into that binary. They weren't weak. In fact, they had shown strength in ways she could not have anticipated. And now they were asking for something she had never been willing to give: respect. She glanced over at the tactical display, still showing the coordinates of the human stronghold, now fortified and prepared for whatever she sent next. It would be simple to send in her fleet, to destroy the remaining resistance, to finish what she had started. But she had already seen the human will, and she knew that wiping them out wouldn't break them. In fact, it might only fuel their determination to resist. The thought gnawed at her. Could she really bring herself to wipe out an entire species for the sake of an imperial goal she wasn't even sure she believed in anymore? Roque stood abruptly, pacing back and forth. She needed answers, but the one thing she had always trusted, her military knowledge, her strategic mind, was failing her now. She had always relied on sheer force, on making others bend to her will. But with the humans, something was different. They were bending, but they were not breaking. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. It was a transmission, incoming from the human commander. She hesitated for only a moment before accepting the call. His face appeared on the screen, calm, but with the weight of a long, hard struggle in his eyes. "Admiral Roque," he began, his voice steady. "I'm not here to negotiate terms again. I'm here to offer you something else. Something you may not expect." Roque leaned forward slightly, curiosity edging out her previous hesitation. "And what is that?" He paused before answering. "Chance to walk away from this. To end the war. We've fought. We've shown our strength. And we've asked for respect. But we don't want to see more of our people die. We don't want to see you and your fleet suffer more losses either. This doesn't have to be a fight to the end." She narrowed her eyes. "And you believe I will simply walk away?" "I believe that, given what you've seen here, you might realize that there's no true victory to be had for either side in this conflict," the commander said quietly. "We don't want war. But if you press on, more will die, on both sides. We'll still be here. Our people will fight, just as yours will. But there's another way." Roque felt her heart thud painfully in her chest. He was right. The war had cost her fleet more than she had expected. It had cost them precious resources, time, and morale. But more than that, it had chipped away at something inside her, the confidence that had always made her unshakable. "I understand your offer," Roque said slowly, "but I'm not sure if I'm ready to accept it. The conquest of this world was never just about territory. It was about sending a message. It was about showing that the Empire cannot be defied." The human commander's expression softened, though his resolve remained intact. "And you've shown that. You've already made your point. Now, let's make the right choice. The one that saves lives. The one that gives us both a future without endless bloodshed. Roque's gaze flickered down to the display again. The human stronghold remained, impenetrable for now. She had faced countless enemies, wiped out entire civilizations, but none had made her feel this. This pull toward something else. Was it peace? Was it the realization that perhaps there was more to strength than conquest? For the first time, Roque realized that her greatest challenge wasn't the human resistance. It was her own decision. She could destroy them. Yes, she could win this war. But at what cost? Could she really justify more bloodshed? Was that the legacy she wanted to leave? She met the human commander's eyes once again, and for a moment, she saw not an enemy, but an equal. Perhaps it was time to find a different path. "I will consider your offer," Roque said, her voice steady, but her heart uncertain. "But know this, if I walk away from this war, it will not be for weakness. It will be because I choose to see a future beyond conflict." The commander nodded, his expression somber yet hopeful. "That's all we're asking for." The transmission ended. Roque stood there, the weight of the decision still pressing on her. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. This was not the end of the war. It was the beginning of something new. In this final part, Roque comes to its